I'm Jen. I'm the kind of old autistic lady. And have you ever wondered or been annoyed when someone used the expression with you as an autistic person who has anxiety, you're making a mountain out of a molehill? If you have, this video will probably speak to some of the feelings that you have about that expression. So, if you've never been to the channel before, my name's Jen, and I am a late diagnosed autistic person. I was diagnosed formally in November and had self identified for a few months prior to that. And my mother used to say this expression to me a lot. And this is not to rag on her at all. She was a really, really great mother. I couldn't have asked for a better mom. She's been deceased now for about 10 years. But she used to say this to me all the time. And first of all, not knowing I was autistic, I was confused by the expression for a number of years because I didn't know that moles are animals and that they dig holes and that the displaced dirt makes a little hill or, yeah, what's called a molehill. And so I was confused by it. And then later, as I got older and watched spy movies and that kind of thing, and I learned about moles in that perspective, I was even more confused by the expression. And of course, as an adult, now I know that moles are, in fact, animals. They displace dirt when they dig, and those little mounds are called molehills. But here's the thing that I think this expression really gets wrong when you're talking about autistic people, and especially autistic people with high anxiety. I did the cover art for this thumbnail. I, purchased the stock images that were needed to make it specifically because when I would have something when I was younger that was really bothering me and to me felt like a huge deal. It could have been something like the insides of my socks bothering me, the texture of a food bothering me, somebody not being nice to me at school, whatever it was. And my mom would say this expression to me as if my problems were insignificant, like the molehill. However, the idea of the problem seeming like the mountain also didn't quite capture it. So I put the little molehill in this image on the moon. Because to me, when I get really anxious about something, even as an adult, whenever I'm in that state, especially if I can kind of feel a shutdown coming on or a meltdown coming on, or choices that have to be made because I'm starting to get overwhelmed, to me, it feels like the problem is as big as the moon. Not a mountain, the moon. And the moon looks small, but it's huge compared to a mountain. So I think that the expression, I am always going to now picture an etching of a molehill on the moon, like this image. But let's step back for a moment and think about why autistic folks can feel that way. And why allistic folks can also feel that way who suffer from anxiety. And I'm not talking about just normal stresses of things that your logical mind says, take some deep breaths, this is going to be okay. If it's a test or something, I'll study for the test, I'll do okay with that. Or, of course, I'm anxious about this conversation I have to have with somebody that I'm dreading, but it's going to be okay. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the kind of anxiety that cannot be logicked with. In other words, as an autistic person, if there is something bothering me, whether it is the feeling of a particular fabric on me, whether it's I got food on my hands and I can't get it off yet, or they're sticky, if we're talking about things like that, or it could be things like, hey, I'm going to be in a social situation later It's going to be mixed company in terms of neurotypical people and neurodivergent people. And I have anxiety about what amount of myself, my true self, I can show and still be able to navigate the situation in a way that's not going to leave other people with a bad impression of me or leaving me out the next time or, whatever the case is. When I am in that state as an autistic person, my logical mind doesn't exactly go there of this is going to be fine, let's take some breaths, we can work this out. It goes past a point that my logical mind can control. And so the mountain that really feels like it's the size of the moon is anxiety in a way that almost always affects me physically. I personally think it's why a lot, or at least a contributing factor of why a lot of autistic people, number one, have gut issues, number two, have sleep issues, and number three, have other co-occurring conditions, because the mind and the body work together in such a way. If a person doesn't have the ability to self-soothe, if it's gone past that point and the meltdown or the shutdown are inevitable, then to me, it feels like I'm past the point of no return and my body is going to try everything possible to keep me from experiencing whatever stressful thing that I have this anxiety about. And so a really good example is today. So I spent some time with a couple of people. I know both these people. I've spent time with them before. I don't know them super well, but they live in the same community I do. It's just a couple of women. Might have been a few more women, but it just ended up being two people. And it was the type of thing where there's an announcement made. Hey, there's going to be this event. If you want to show up at the event, just let us know so that we get a big enough table. And it's not necessarily tied to having a close relationship with people. In essence, it's a group that is for people that want to meet up and do something in the community where we live. And I generally, if I'm going to do that kind of thing, like smaller environments, and this was going to be a smaller environment, but I had a lot of anxiety about it. Not so much because these people are scary or judgmental or anything like that, but rather because I have not socialized with anybody in person in a few months. So if you're new to the channel, or if you've been watching my videos out of order in terms of when I filmed them, I had neck surgery about a month ago, and I had a herniated disc get so bad that I found out I would need surgery if conservative treatment didn't fix the issue. So for about 2 months, I really wasn't socializing because it was very difficult for me to drive. And I didn't feel like being around people. I was tired all the time between physical therapy and my body was trying to heal. And so I just didn't socialize for a couple months. And as an autistic person, looking forward to socializing with people that I'm not super, like, these aren't people I've known for years and years. They're people I know, but they're not people that I could tell you their deepest, darkest secrets about or anything like that. So I met with them and they're friendly people. Okay. This was not a threatening situation at all. And I know that both these people are very friendly to neurodivergent people. Okay. So it wasn't even a matter of, hey, I'm going to be with these neurotypical people and they don't understand, neurodivergent people. It was not that at all. But yet my body reacted in a way that when I got home, I was having gut issues, even though there was no logical reason for it. And it's because the anxiety, even though the conversation was going well, even though I was being included, even though everybody was being really nice, the longer and longer that this activity went on, the more and more stress I was getting to be under, not because of masking or anything like that. It was partly the social dynamic because I wasn't used to being around people. It was partly the environment because it was a little loud. The physical place where we were had a lot of hard surfaces, so whenever there's noise, there weren't things like curtains and carpets absorbing that sound. And then the third reason was because I was sitting on a wooden chair, and after a while I was getting really uncomfortable. So it just kept building and building. And I wish this didn't happen. I wish I could be a fly on the wall inside somebody else's head who's not autistic or is very socially fluent to know if the same thing happens. But for me, when I'm in a situation like that where I have a combination of there's a lot of loud noises, I'm getting uncomfortable from sitting on this chair, and the environment is just, there's other people around. Even when things are going well, my body starts to perceive that there is harm there, that my logical mind can say there's nothing harmful here. If you sit here for another 10 minutes, nothing bad's going to happen. If you, stay here and listen for another 10 minutes, nothing bad's going to happen. My brain can say that all it wants. But the rest of my body is going to continue to get more and more energy spilled into whatever it takes to get me to leave. Whether it's gut issues, whether all of a sudden I'm really tired, whether it's, my butt's really sore from sitting on the chair and my brain's attention is going to go toward that. Sometimes it's things even like, oh, suddenly my back really hurts. Even though a minute before it didn't hurt, my body just starts sending more and more and more signals of, you got to get out of here. And granted, this was after a while. It wasn't like it happened when I immediately sat down and started talking. I was there a good chunk of time. But it wasn't a case of, oh, I have this other thing I have to do at a certain time. I'm going to leave at whatever time that is. No. It is, I hit a point of my body saying, no, this needs to be done. And the physical sensations are going to flow as if it feels like it's getting dangerous and or untenable. So the reason I bring all of this up is because I know that I can't be the only one that experiences this. And it's, of course, much worse if I'm in a situation with people I don't know, a place I don't know, food or drink that I'm not familiar with the environment, with how loud it's going to be, what the seating is going to be like, all those kinds of things. You add more variables into it and it gets worse. And I wouldn't say that I shut down or I melted down. Essentially, my body said, you are going to leave. I will make you leave. We're not going to let you get to the point of shutting down or melting down because we will just make you so physically uncomfortable that you have to leave. And as soon as you get out of the situation, you'll feel just fine. And maybe that is my body's way of having a protective mechanism from getting to that point. I don't know. But in the moment, it feels like as big as the moon. So if you do relate with this, know that I personally think it's a pretty common experience among autistic people. I think that's part of why we stick to, we go places, we're going to eat the same thing, we're going to wear the same thing, we want the routines, because when these things get changed up and then you add a social element into it, our bodies and our brains, I think, just interact a little bit differently. So I'm not ever going to use the expression with anybody in my life and say you're making a mountain out of a molehill, because I don't know what that person's problem or anxiety feels like to them. And I don't want to say that it's dismissive, like my mother was using it in a dismissive way. It was just that she was coming from a place that was very different from where I was coming from. And rather than helping me regulate through it, I'm sure she was raised the same way, probably, where, when there's something distressing, you figure out a way to self soothe, or you figure out a way to make it not seem so scary. And even though I can cope with that now as an adult, I don't want to use that phrase with anybody else. I don't like the expression, I never have. But I am putting this as part of a series called The Dark Side of Autism, because I think that other people, especially neurotypical people, want to throw that kind of expression on us at times. Not everybody, but some people at times, because they don't understand the internal experience of what's going on. They just see the outside freak out. And so, even if it's not this exact expression, the dismissiveness of going, well, what's that person's problem? There's nothing horrible happening right now. The internal experience is something that only the person can feel who is going through whatever the thing is. I don't have children. If I did, I would try to make a point of not using this expression with kids, because I think even if kids know what a mole is and even understand it and don't take it so literally, because I kid you not, when I was a little kid and I would hear this expression, what I thought it meant was, moles on people's skin, the kind of thing you get checked out to see if you have cancer. I thought my mother was trying to tell me that for some reason it was like I was trying to make something big like a mountain out of moles. That's what I thought it was. Like they were going to get bigger and bigger until they formed like a little hill. I don't know, like a boil or something. I didn't know. So to end on a light note, if you personally right now are going through something that feels like it's the size of the moon, know that it's valid to feel that way. Know that until you get to be regulated by doing whatever it is that regulates you, whether it's stimming, whether it's journaling, reading, your special interest, whatever it is that's going to help you to regulate through that thing, know that you're wired that way. You're wired to need different things to regulate because of not only autism, but your unique experience of being you. And it may look different from another autistic person. And that's my final point, that if you are somebody who is new to the autistic community, either because you're wondering if you might be autistic or you were recently diagnosed, and you are interacting with other people in the autistic community, some late diagnosed, but also some people that have been in the know that they were autistic for a very long time, since they were children, know that sometimes it's easy to hear somebody else say how they regulate or say what they do, even like listening to me. And you go, oh, wow, that should work for me. And then you try that and it doesn't work. Well, why doesn't it work? Because we're different people with different needs. And the way that each of our brains is wired is different. It's why it's not easy to test somebody for autism. It's why there's not a blood test for it, I think. In my opinion, I think it's also why there isn't one test, that they do a battery of tests when somebody's formally diagnosed, because it's a complicated thing and everybody's so different, and the way autism presents can be so different from person to person. So know that just because one autistic person uses a particular strategy, a particular stim, a particular way of closing off the senses, like I've talked before about, I close my eyes when I get into that sort of, I need to take part of the stimuli out of my being for a moment, lots of times, in order to just hang in there to be frank. So if you're enjoying the content, like and subscribe. I'm glad that you're watching. I hope that you're browsing my other content, and know that you are not alone in this journey. Take care.